Welcome to the Transform Sales Podcast, where forward-thinking business leaders come to share their experiences and ideas, learn from each other, and amplify their results together.
Hey guys, Amir Reiter with the Transform Sales Podcast. I got my guest today, CEO of ProspectHunter, Jody Johnson. Jody, pleasure having you on. I know we rescheduled this a few times. You were too busy making meetings for your clients. Kept punking me.
Yeah, it's been 2022 was a violent close. I will say it was very, very chaotic, but I love chaos, so in 2023 is even off to a better start. So, but I am super glad that we're here. So
it was a chaotic close
great
for everybody. And then back into kind of what you said about you liking chaos. I'm sure you do, which is kind of where I'll start the question. How did you get into the outsourced sales business? We already know you love chaos. That's a big part of it. But yeah, what brought you to this industry? What was the compelling event, the reason that you decided to open the sales agency?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually worked for a company named Vendir Partners many moons ago. And I just fell in love with the idea of being able to go from one campaign to the next and trying to find commonalities between solving problems. So I think if you're going to be in this business, you really have to be in love with solving problems through sales. Whether you're in HR and you're trying to gain a market, or your solution is focused on IT. You look for the pains that a solution solves, and you bring that to market through questions. And so I really the other real big piece of how and why I really wanted to get into this is because sales development is such a entrepreneurial, spirited job. You have to be gritty, which I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Gritty kind of guy. You also have to be very, and also resilience and grittiness is kind of the same thing. And then, you have to really fall in love with the connecting of people. And so the personal development, the leadership that's required, and the journey that you can make. I mean, a lot of my peers that were in that same business ended up going on and starting their own businesses. Mm-hmm. And so I followed that same path, and so that's.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You were a military guy too, right? Yeah.
It's funny. There's a picture over here that you might be able to see of my father. It's actually my father that was the military guy. He was in the special forces and served the Army. So he was an Army Ranger and raised by a military man for sure. And so ProspectHunter is kind of a shout out to him. I lost him before I was able to actually show him that I'm a CEO, I'm a business owner. I did something with my life, Dad, because I was a bit of a screw up in high school. So so that's kind of where the military theme with ProspectHunter kind of comes from.
Well, that story makes sense, and it rings home to me. It seems like you don't shy away from a difficult problem. I think sales in general is often overlooked in a sense where people have this stigma. I don't like salespeople, I don't like this, but it is really the core of our economy. And it is the way that
100%.
Amazing products, amazing services can get in the right people's hands, right? So I think one thing they forget is that, if a superior product or service exists, but they're not super strong with Google Ads or SEO or keywords, you in a way, or people in our industry are actually helping buyers find the right products and helping sellers. So it's definitely a tough job, and somebody's got to do it. We appreciate you being in the industry. How long has ProspectHunter been around for?
Oh, this year will be 11 years,
God.
Actually. I know we've stayed underneath. One of my mentors told me to grow down before you grow up, and to focus on your roots. If you want to be a big tree, you need to have a strong root system.
It's like the opposite of what FTX did, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you gotta, if you want to be a big tree, you gotta have a root system to sustain it. So we've stayed underground for a while.
Well, for now, until until we get you out there.
It was-
Well, 11 years, you've probably seen it and heard it all. But the idea of this show really is for people who have, claimed that they've outsourced sales before and it failed, but of course they're back at it because they need sales, or building an SDR team internally and want to learn, or they're doing both. They need to hit revenue goals, right? And the idea is that by listening to transparent stories about mistakes that buyers make, perhaps buyers can become better buyers by just listening to the mistakes, because I think we all know that we can learn a lot from mistakes. So 11 years of experience. I'm going to ask my first question, the main question. What is the most common mistake that buyers make when searching for a sales agency?
I think that the biggest mistake that they make is really that they get caught up in the metrics, and they get caught up in the outcomes versus the relationship piece of the puzzle. And what I mean by that is that they drive towards a commitment to the goal, which absolutely needs to be reached. They will look for performance based when they can, but really the way and the communication path that you're taking with that relationship is really key. And it should be centered around conversations. Conversations are what allow you to be able to fix a problem when you're in the program. And if you're just reporting on calls, emails, the social touch points that you're making, and the amount of meetings that you've scheduled, you're not going to be able to understand the sauce that's going to be able to drive all of that, all of those metrics. And that sauce is the conversations. And so having some type of reporting system that tells you what kind of conversations are we getting into, and let's talk about some of those conversations, is one of the biggest mistakes that I see is overlooked within campaigns like these. Because when you have it inside, you're talking about logos that you cracked, that you just made headway on, and you're going to your leader and you're saying, "Hey, I made headway with HP, for example, and I talked to this person," and that creates energy. And what happens in that conversation will pull, "Hey, they need to see this piece of collateral. Let's also get this other person on the call when you schedule that, because they have relationships over here." Those kind of things are what are going to drive the pipeline, in my opinion.
That is a little bit to unravel, and I'm going to do it right now because I understand what you're talking about, right? So the question started off what mistakes that buyers make when selecting an agency. You got into, which is a very, very good sign of a guy who grinds hard for 11 years, because you immediately think about keeping the customer happy, not getting the customer, right? So your first conversation, it's based around and obviously if I heard you correctly, that when shopping for an outsourced sales agency, if you don't understand what campaign you're launching and what KPIs to measure, it doesn't matter who you select, you will be unsatisfied with the performance, right? So it's like you're basically saying that coming prepared as a buyer to understand what KPIs that matter today are not the KPIs for yesterday, right? Like did you make 100 phone calls is not a KPI that gets it. You went right to conversations, right? So it's almost like a blended statement, right? Like you're making a statement like the mistakes the buyers make are these mistakes, but the answer is knowing what KPIs matter now, right? Because if a buyer,
Right.
Okay. So
yeah, I think that, I guess the report, if I was, I guess, thank you. Yeah, I would say also, maybe to sum that up, how do they report to you? Be clear on how you're getting reported to, and understand those communication touch points so that you have good communication with because it's ultimately a relationship that you're building, that you, in an outsourced relationship, you have to be able to have solid communication between the two, because it's such a key piece of your pipeline. And it's,
well, that's the second question. We're going to get into that, right? But I want to stick to the mistake buyers make, right? So, have you noticed that if a buyer comes with the right KPIs at first, that the sales process is smooth and the performance process is smooth? And, what do you do if a buyer is focusing on the wrong KPIs during a call? What do you say to them? Do you go with it and say, yeah, like we'll get you these many calls, or is it that moment where you're educating a buyer like, hey, as much as you want an ROI on cash in 6 months, on a 9-month sales cycle, you are in a market validation. Are you educating the buyers at that point? What do you say to a buyer who comes in with the wrong KPIs?
Oh yeah, well, definitely have to level set. I think that being on the same page is mission critical, is almost equally is mission critical. So there's nothing worse than getting started and knowing that you're on the wrong foot. So it's much better at the sales process to be able to say, this doesn't work. You know, I don't, I look to provide a foundation of why it won't work, not just push back to make my goal a little bit easier to hit. I like to be able to say, look, if you're targeting Fortune 500 companies and the C-suite in Louisiana, we're not going to have a list of 1,000 to target, in Shreveport, Louisiana. Like if it's Shreveport, Louisiana, we're not going to be able, nothing wrong with Shreveport. I'm just saying that there's not thousands of Fortune 500 companies there.
Sales is hard as is when you use logic. Once you throw logic out the window, good luck, right? That's a big deal.
Absolutely.
So during a buying process, and I'll agree with you, like a common mistake they make is focusing on the wrong KPIs. Tell me now because obviously there's different mistakes, right? There's a mistake from a procurement, now you're selected, and then there's a mistake that they can make while working with you because these are services, right? Same thing as software. If software is not onboarded correctly, deployed correctly, you can fail with an onboarding of software, but it's happening all the time. But like, what mistakes do you see buyers make when, let's just say, they come in with the right KPIs, they come in with the right understanding of measurement, now they hired you and you're like, man, this looked like a great buyer. This was a buyer that I came in prepared, didn't make these mistakes that I normally see with accounts that tend to fail. But now we're in the danger zone. What are those mistakes that they make when working with you?
Yeah, I think there's a few things there. One that comes to mind right off the bat is when is not giving a campaign enough time to provide like a proof of concept. We intentionally have a 4-month pilot to be able to set the program up properly and to be able to have enough runway to be able to prove a concept, because you're going to have scheduled meetings, then they need to attend, then you need to make adjustments to be able to dial in a program. Now it's going to be case by case and, depends on the solution that you're kind of marketing. Yeah. Another common mistake is, I think, just putting it all on the vendor to be able to fix the problem. I think it needs to be very collaborative. I think you need to be able to bring intelligence from both sides to the relationship. And those are the two biggest that I think.
And it makes sense. Like,
a hands-off client, and then just creating a significant amount of pressure to try to drive the results. Like, we need to hit this metric in 1 month, and we need to see this in 2 months. I mean, it's good to be, to have
good to have a plan,
your benchmarks, but yeah,
it's not
exactly.
Not a plan that's going to set you up with a 95% chance of not hitting it, right? That's good to do on a PIP if you want to fire somebody, but not good if you hired an agency.
Not in a relationship.
Yeah,
not developing a relationship. I think you need to prove the concept, and I think that the other thing is that you should look for an agency that you plan on partnering with for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's not a punch in the arm.
Yeah, back when you said outsource, I was laughing because it's like, what does that outsource in-house even mean? A W-2 is to track taxes, right? And we're all remote, so it's like, if I give you $20,000 and I give an employee $20,000, the big difference is I'm paying 7.1% extra for 941 tax, and I'm more liable to getting sued versus you have an insurance policy. So, I think the word outsourcing is also going to be transformed in the next 15 years. Now they're all remote, and it's just, almost a tribal kind of instinct of you versus them.
That's really good. Yeah. I really didn't think about it like that, but that's really strong, because I'm a firm believer in outsourcing. Tim Ferriss, when I was in my early days with Vendir, I got onto Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Workweek, and he's just a huge promoter of just outsource everything that you're not an expert on, or that you can save time on. And so, but to your point, there's almost more risk in W-2.
Do you know how many people,
Right.
software companies I've talked to that said we don't outsource? And I was like, SaaS is outsourcing. It's software as a service. It is, don't buy my software because we already built it, rent it. And that is the same model as a sales agency, sales trainer, same consultant. So it's very interesting that people don't really understand that their model is the same as outsourcing, right? So it's like, if you don't
Right.
outsource, but you expect people to buy your software, then you're kind of not aligned, right? Like they should be like,
I
I'm not going
think
to buy
it's
your
because,
software because I'm going to do it in-house. And you'd be like, well, you know, we did it all for you. You just pay a monthly fee. It's the same thing, right?
and I think the fear is that the culture's lost. That's when somebody doesn't want to outsource, they're concerned about either production or culture
Yeah.
loss. And so if you look at the agency as a long-term partner and as a piece of your business and integrate it as a piece of your business, that's the way to go. You know what I mean? But if it's disconnected and you plan on throwing them away, it's
Well, for
nobody
everybody
likes that.
listening, there's a reason why there's 500 plus sales agencies that have been around for 11 years that you may have not heard of. It's not because everyone's churning. It's because the people who actually treat them like family, actually see a long-term relationship, tend to work with them for a very long time. I'm like, we have, CloudTask is a pure marketplace now, but we have the legacy business still has 2 clients that have been renewing for 5 years with a team of 20 people, right? Because we're part of the team. It's so integrated that they treat them like family. They pay their lunches, right? So it's interesting that a lot of people companies that hire agencies tend to have this whole work with me as a partner. I'll be long term, but they don't buy the same way, right? It's almost as if we have to connect the way they want to sell with the way they want to buy, right? And if they buy
Right.
the way they're going to sell, they'll get better outcomes, right? Aside from the communication, have you ever, by the way, the 4 months is a magic number, right? Like we are going to collect data on this, like as a marketplace, like we plan on collecting exactly how long engagements work. So it could be more, so buyers can buy with more of less reviews, more scientific, more like, these agencies have a 12-month LTV with a customer because that is a good indicator of a good match, right?
Right.
And I've noticed that when we were CloudTask as a service company, we had more unhappy customers at a lower price than month by month. When we did 12-month contracts, 6-month contracts, they're still the customers we have today, right? And we also have partners that have 12-month contracts with 4-month outs, right? So I feel without the data to back it, which I like to get the data, that 4-month mark is this magic mark, right? And there's a big difference between a campaign that's calling 7,000 leads that just came to your booth at an event maybe 3 weeks before you hired an agency versus cold leads in a region so like people also forget that the time it takes is connected to what you've done so far in the market, what kind of leads, right? Because ZoomInfo's contact data leads, right? A person who says, yes, I'm interested in buying could be a sales qualified lead, right? So people forget to talk about like what the campaign's targeting, and that can really change your performance. Like if you went to an event and you got 10,000 leads, you might get a lot of performance in the first month because people know you, they met you, and they're ready to hear from you. If it's super cold and you're selling a huge enterprise product in a huge buying community, it can take 3 or 4 meetings a month until you get a meeting. But that one meeting might be $1 million sale that pays for your whole campaign. So, I'll just add to what Jody said, that people need to really get educated on the type of campaign, market validation, return on sales, right? Like what is the campaign's goal and who they're targeting? Because without knowing that, 4 months is a magic mark, right? But if people know this, you'll have even more control over what is good and bad, right? This has all been super helpful. I know, for me, I know that those are 2 big issues. I like the fact that, you kind of walked into your first answer had more to do with them working with you than buying from you, which is for me a good sign of like the fact that you're here to win, right? And I think a lot of people listening should know that like founders of sales agencies are very competitive people. It is not a win to get a client; it is a win to deliver an ROI. And typically agencies, buyers and sellers are on the same side. Aside from the adversarial behavior, we truly actually want to generate revenue from, and buyers, I'm sure, truly want to generate a good program. So I'm hoping one day everybody can play together. I'm going to try to talk about the 80-20 rule, right? And really understand who your best customers are without implying that if you pick one, it means you can't do the other. So I'm going to start it off with sales, services or software? You had to only pick one. Which one are you picking and why?
I personally would pick services. If it's a larger software with a little bit more of an elongated sales cycle, then I might
Let's
say
focus on
software.
services.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally like services. I think that with software, there's a lot of inbound marketing that you can do from bringing in inbound leads. You can
Free
create a lot more
trials,
leads that
product
way.
led, product led
And
growth.
if that's in place, and you're suggesting that you need follow up on leads, I want that business all day. I want the follow up because I also feel like a big problem is time to lead and getting follow up
Huge.
quickly. And companies don't do a good job of that.
Huge.
They sit on leads, and it needs to be fast, and the sequence that you have in place needs to be good. But if it's just pure play, I think I would go with services because I feel like there's a little bit more value in the relationship. I think outbound marketing is a stronger play for services.
Campaigns located United States, EMEA, APAC. What's your best region?
U.S.
Okay,
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Average contract value, 50,000 and less or 50,000 and above?
Average. Oh man, it's just below 50,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just below 50. What's the bottom? I'm talking sweet spot here.
I would. Yeah. So I think 32 is it's pretty specific.
I like
it's
it.
32. But that's because we do 4-month engagements, and we do that to serve the client to be able to prove our concept. But we have an 85% retention rate with 4-month pilots, and so we do a 4-month pilot and look to renew at a 12-month on like a 12-month campaign.
That makes sense to me, and I understand the numbers, right? For everybody listening, Jody's kind of coming in with this sweet spot where he knows that his expertise over the 4 months will start developing enough meetings, enough traction to show that there'll be a 400% ROI on the 12-month cycle. And people can start seeing that clearly because there is a sweet spot with this stuff, right? And I knew you would answer services because you started off by talking about the fact that you like the challenge, right? So I think for me, hearing that, it makes sense that you're more interested in helping the 11-year service business owner that's, grinding like you versus the big tech CEO who you never talk to. They're like these big money making and big money losing machines that are unemotional. So I could see that you probably enjoy helping leaders build their business, especially in that service region, which makes sense. But anybody listening, you got software, you got leads to follow up, ProspectHunter is also your people. So you didn't say no to everybody, but as a service provider, it's tough to focus on only one ICP, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
When you can serve a wide audience, when you can serve a lot of people, which we can because we've been doing this for a long time. We've helped people get planes in the air. We've provided lead generation for private jet fleets to nutraceutical lab scientists that want to sell a dietary gum supplement. I never saw those campaigns coming, you know what I mean? But services for the most part. And I would just like to say this. With software companies, I like to consult because I think that there is a different path for the SDR in their climate. I'll leave that as a intrigue. We can. I know that we might be coming up.
No, this all makes sense.
But maybe message me or DM me on that.
This all makes sense. I'm thinking in my head. I'm like, why has Jody not uploaded his case studies to his marketplace listing? Because everything that you do makes you more experienced than the guy who hasn't done it before, right? And if you're going to select somebody, you could select a rep or an agency that has never worked in selling jets, or you can talk to ProspectHunter that has done jets. I hate saying this, but it takes one campaign to have a leg up on another person, right? You don't need to have 7 campaigns. One campaign, you learn a lot from one campaign, right? No, Joe, this has been awesome. I look forward to helping all kinds of buyers find you, but the best ones, the service companies in the United States,
great.
$32,000. That's my job, and making sure that the buyers have a good experience in reducing risk. Before we go, if somebody wanted to connect with you, grab some content from you, follow you, what's the best channel? Where can they find you?
I mean, I think LinkedIn is a great channel for me. ProspectHunter.com is another great. But you can call me, text me. I love to be available for people.
Yeah.
My number's 214-229-8902. Give me a shout.
I'm going to WhatsApp you. Can you go on WhatsApp finally?
Yeah.
Such an American.
I know. Well, I had so many spam requests, and then and my wife was asking me who all these women were.
They do that. There's random Asian women who will message you. They're obviously not random Asian women. They're scammers, but they use a picture of a random Asian woman, and they're like, "Hi, John. How do I know you?" So it's funny you bring this up before we go. I messed with one of them recently, and I wrote back. I was like, "This is Amir's wife. He's cheating on me, isn't me?" And the person was like, no, I don't know this person. I was messing with them, but it was probably some call center. It was probably some center in Africa or Asia trying to scam people. We'll get you back on.
I need to get on WhatsApp. I need to get on WhatsApp.
You can help more people if you're on WhatsApp, Just think of it that way.
I know. I need to get on there. I will. I'll get on. I'll get back on WhatsApp.
This has been great. Everybody, thank you for listening and chiming into the Transform Sales podcast. Jody, I will let you go. Have a wonderful day. And
hey, I appreciate it.
I'm going to call you randomly just to say what's up all the time.
I love it. I love cold calls.
And are you coming to Columbia, to Medellin, to the conference?
I'm going to have to try to I wrote it down. I've got it on my bucket list now, so we'll try to get there.
I'll message you from a random female's profile on WhatsApp. All right. See ya.
Awesome, man. Take care.